Hello, and welcome to another week of the Storied Arcs podcast. I'm your co-host, Mike.
And I'm your co-host, Alex.
And today, we are continuing Lonely Sci-Fi Month with Gone by Jock from DSTLRY. There's a couple other names to mention. We have a letterer, and you do have a designer credited. To me, that's more ambiguous than editor, because editor can be this broad range of things, and designer can be a whole bucket. Like, that could be just the logo. It could be someone helping, come up with layouts or things like that.
If it's layouts, it's normally layouts. Designer, obviously, is a lot of the style of the book itself. But I mean, in terms of the book, Jock is writer and artist. He's also credited with colors along with Lee Lowridge. I don't know if it's a matter of, that might have just been a matter of helping get the book out on time with Lee coming in, because I don't know. I'm trying to remember if. Oh, you know what that actually might have been? Well, no. Now that I think about it, I'm trying to think back on some of Jock's other books, like some of his other creator-owned work. A lot of the stuff he's done with Scott Snyder, if he's had a colorist, and honestly, I do not know. I know so I'm not going to speculate off the top of my head, but Lee Lowridge is credited as a colorist here. We'll say co-colorist, and the letters are by Ann World Designs. But yeah, outside of that, I mean, this is Jock's book. This is kind of his baby here. As a writer and an artist, kind of doing both of those. This is not, I want to say maybe one of the kind of the first things he's done creator owned wise, where he's written and drawn. So yeah, from that angle, I think it's cool to see when an artist, a well-known artist, especially someone like Jock, who's had so much success and is kind of so specifically tied to a handful of writers,
Sure.
that there are frequent collaborators that if these guys are putting a book out, you're going to get it because that team has worked together so many times, that they're have like a natural simpatico. But it's cool to see someone like an artist get a chance to go out and tell their own story, write and draw it. I think we were talking a little earlier before we started recording here. I think from a specific narrative structure, like what actually happens beat to beat in the story here, it's got some holes. Not the strongest, but in terms of from the art side only, I think the book is absolutely gorgeous. I think it looks fantastic. This is, I think this is a great use of the DSTLRY format, being that oversized magazine size, like prestige format, kind of square bound. It looks absolutely incredible in print.
Yeah. Well, I mean, not to sound like that old curmudgeon at the comic shop, it does look incredible. No complaints. It should for $9 an issue.
Well, yeah.
I mean, it should look that good, but it does live up to it, and that's kind of a big ask for $9 single issue. And again, the caveats of it's longer, it's bigger, it's better material,
and that is one of the selling points of DSTLRY. I don't know how much we touched on it. We touched on it a little bit in the Zero a few weeks back when it listed off kind of what the names of the founding members, like the main creators that signed on initially. Part of the pitch was like, these are some of the biggest names in comics, both writers and specifically artists. So that the DSTLRY was selling their brand off of, these people, you've seen their work at Marvel and DC and their creator-owned stuff as well. You know who they are, and you're going to buy this book because you're familiar with it. And so giving artists that extra space on the page, that more room, they're relying on the fact that these artists are incredible. They're relying on that is a selling point beyond what any of the books are actually about. They wanted to put together great teams, writers and artists, and really let the artists just flex. And so for that alone, you you're right. I mean, $9 an issue like that is it can be pretty steep. But if you're someone that is into,
but it's not. It's also not an ongoing series. This is very finite.
Yeah, it's the majority of Distillery books are 3 issues. A handful have gone a little longer. Like there's a book called Life that I think got up to 6 or 7, maybe ongoing, but a lot of them are 3 issues. They're designed that way. You put out 3 issues in single format, and then you get a nice, good-looking hardcover after the fact, and page wise, it works out nicely because, each of those issues are a little bigger. They're probably, closer to like 40 pages, something like that, 40, 45. So they're almost
I didn't have a count on it, but they're clearly oversized.
I didn't either, but they're almost double length in terms of actual page number versus a standard floppy. So you're getting twice the page count and they're larger pages. So if you start doing the math there, the where comics are now at $3.99 or $4.99, sometimes $5.99. When you break it down like a unit cost, like if you're going to Costco or something like that, and you're buying in bulk, the unit cost per page or panel or something like that works out if you really want to break the math down. But you are right, fair. But you are right though. It is a big ask to come to readers and say, hey, buy into this, not just on a price point, but buy into this premium format, and so the selling point has to be like, this has got to be the highest quality, it has
right. And for $9 an issue, no offense, this is not where you're going to discover new artists. You're buying the name Jock, which is why I bought the book.
Exactly. Yeah, you're buying Jock, you're buying Tynan and Chartier, you're buying Clunan and Lotte. Yeah, you're buying Zdarsky. You see the name, you're gonna buy it. And hopefully, if you are a new reader and you see what is this giant sized book that doesn't fit on the shelf or in a box that I own, and you pick it up and you flip through it, I think the hope is that without having to read it, just seeing the art on the page is enough for folks to buy in. If you happen to be someone who doesn't recognize the names, who isn't kind of as versed in comic creators. So, it is a gamble. But I think Distillery probably looked at it. I'd imagine that they looked at it like, hey, if you're fans, if they're talking to the creators, if your fan base just buys these books, just that, we should probably be all right. Like if you guys can sell that, not saying that every book that James Tynan writes is going to sell like Something is Killing the Children, but like Tynan has his audience, and if those people just buy the books that he does at Distillery, they're willing to pay for that because they have a track record with him. That they probably think that's good enough. And you're right, Jock is one of those guys. And again, the big selling point here was that Jock's also writing it. So you're getting a full Jock story kind of for the first time on the creator-owned side. So it's a big deal.
Okay, so I have one kind of meta question about it.
Sure.
That I was kind of chewing on as I was reading it, and I don't like, this could sound negative, and this is I'm sorry, I apologize if the question sounds negative. I mean it as a curiosity. But I think I've not yet found a non-negative way to formulate it. So just here it comes. I love Jock. But I was wondering if this was a pretty early book for Distillery, as I recall, like one of the first few titles that came out.
This was the first full-length book that came out, which doesn't mean it was the first one done, but
it was very early. Yeah,
there was a short. It was one of the short stories that was included in the Devil's Cut, which was a collection of short stories that Distillery put out first, and then spinning out of that, that story was called The Stowaway. It was like a prologue for the world and the character of Abby. But this was the first one that came out after that, the first series, which again doesn't mean it was the first one done or anything like that. But yeah, production wise, this was the first actual entry that Distillery put out there.
Perfect. Okay. So my question was, in an effort to attract a big name creator and have someone like Jock take a swing at writing, was part of their pitch to be super creator friendly. You don't have to work with an editor. You don't have to work with one of our editors. Because as I was reading it, like narratively, world building wise, I thought, I think an editor, without expanding or contracting the story at all, could have just added, a sentence here, a sentence there, perhaps changed a few things, and it would have made a lot more sense. Well, like, it's a little difficult to hang with, but that could just as easily be a criticism of me rather than of Jock. I'm not saying it as a criticism.
I agree with you. I think the story could be a little tighter. Not in terms of story contraction. I think just in terms of actually explaining and following the narrative.
The beats.
Yeah. There are things that happen that I remember reading the first time and being like, wait, did I forget something? Like, did I miss something? Was there a moment, like, clearly this thing I just read is meant to be like a big character moment, but I have no connection to it. Did I, as the reader, forget something? And you scroll back or you flip back and you're like, oh, no, wait, no, that there wasn't anything there. So
there's a bombshell between two characters, and you're like,
yes, yeah, like, wait, was that
is this the guy from before, or is this a different guy?
Exactly.
A lot of people know her father.
Yeah.
Some people, a lot of people in the galaxy say they know who she is after she says her first name.
Yeah.
And it's I'm sorry, unless she's like spitting image of her parents or something.
There is. I agree. Narratively, they're not holes, they're gaps. They're like, well, if there had been like a couple panels earlier and set this up, and then when you come back to it an issue and a half later, and it's like, oh, that's what that meant.
Exactly.
It's those,
lay some pipe and then pay it off.
Yes, you could be a little bit there, and so I do agree with that. It is a little loose narratively that way. Will Dennis is credited as the editor, and I'm sure it went through the regular process. At the same time, though, I'm sure a lot of it is just like, hey, man, tell your story. You got 3 issues, kind of do what you want there, and not saying that that's a good or a bad thing, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, I'm he's telling the story that he wants there, and it's not connected to anything else. It is self-contained. So, in terms of level of oversight, how much, freedom he got, how much someone like Will Dennis, who is, has a long distinguished career as a comic book editor and creator, I don't know. I can't speak to that, but on the surface, will absolutely agree with you that from a strictly narrative standpoint, there are just it feels like there are some leaps,
Yeah.
It just feels like as a reader, I'm not lost at what's happening, but I'm lost at what the characters are experiencing.
I'm lost at what it means. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like I was extrapolating a lot of character beats from social commentary, because the social commentary I got and really liked. Yeah. And I think that the most potent thing for me was, the ship and everyone on it, represents, the rich, the aristocratic, the whatever, in the world. And she thinks they hate her or out to get her. And the most brutal truth is oh no, they just don't care at all. Yeah, they don't know. They don't even know you to care about hating you. Which, was pulling to mind the Albus Dumbledore quote: "The indifference and neglect often do much more damage than outright dislike."
Yeah, I agree. I think thematically, you're right. It definitely lands. But I think what you said about having to interpolate character moments, there's a lot left to the reader to make connections that are spoken once at the revelation, at the reveal.
Right.
You have to be like, huh? And you have to do the back calculation of oh, so that must have been this, and that was that. But everything all the strings that you're tying together, all these points, all happen off page, off panel. you know, because none of it's shown. You're not connecting back to anything you saw or read. You're having to make those connections. So yeah, I think it's a little on the weaker side there, but I agree entirely that thematically, in terms of the world that he created and presented, and I think what he's trying to represent and comment on the world and society, I think that stuff comes out really clear, and that stuff I think is really interesting.
Yeah, well, it actually made me, I mean, as we talk about it, as expected, I'm like, you know, maybe this is just, maybe that's the experience he wanted.
It could be,
you know, and to focus on, you know, whatever. But it's reminding me of, I was thinking about this earlier today. At the week we're releasing this is the same week we're recording it, which rarely happens for us. So this week, the story that I heard today was Matt Damon and Ben Affleck on Joe Rogan, which I do not listen to Joe Rogan, to be 100% clear. But they were on there promoting their new Netflix movie, and they were using that platform to bash Netflix. And they were saying, like, you know, Netflix, you know, when you sign to make a movie there, they have certain clauses in that you have to agree to as a concession to you are making second screen content. So you have to have characters say out loud everything they're thinking. You have to have characters reiterate the main point of the story at least 5 times. You have to have a big action scene in the first 5 minutes, regardless of the genre of the movie. It has to be some big set spectacle to get you to look up. But most importantly is that someone needs to be not have an eye on the screen and be able to follow all of the plot without feeling left behind. And so all of the content is so dumbed down because of that. Now, like, the irony is, like, they're here promoting a movie they made on Netflix. They're not like noobs in the industry. Like, they knew what they were getting into. They signed that contract. They made the thing. Yeah. And so it's like, well, people can complain about this, but not you guys. But anyway, it had me thinking, like, wow, you know, there are no second screen comic readers, and there never will be, because of the nature of the medium. It is an active, engaging thing. And I think, like, so many movies and TV, especially anything made straight to streaming, has that bias toward second screen, dumbing it down, like slowing it down to a trickle, you know, slowly releasing information, beating you over the head with the points to make sure you're not missing anything, not feeling left behind. And I think a writer like Jock is like, I'm actually okay with that. Like, I'm okay if you struggle a little bit. And I think, you know, the same thing was true with The Seeds, you know, and Nascenti was one of those books where you're just like, did I miss something? Did I miss world building? Did I miss, like, what's the setting here? And it's like, it doesn't matter. Like, you just have to keep reading and keep turning the page. Trust me, I'm taking you on a journey. And you may or may not like the journey. You know, mileage may vary, but I like when a reader has a very clear point of view and clear style. And I think, like, to Jock's credit as a writer, it's not like he's waffling in and out of coherence. Like,
that is true. He's very consistent. Yeah.
Right. It's like he's shooting it with a long shot lens or something, but it's not like he's doing a bunch of random shots that way. He's shooting the whole thing this way. And so you kind of are getting her life in vignettes. I mean, like, as soon as you feel like you have any bearing on what's happening, it skips 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is a, you know, an interesting creative choice for this type of story. And I think specifically for the theme that we picked this month, this idea of lonely sci-fi, right? Like, this isn't like we're not following Abby on this entire journey, right? This isn't like Roy last week, where we're seeing him alone on this spaceship, or we're seeing him throughout the travel from one place to another. She gets on this ship, and we see kind of, you know, I think, what is it, like 8 weeks out initially, you know, so we see how she's kind of living early on. And then you're right, boom, smash cut 10 years later or 8 years later, whatever it is. And you're like, oh, damn, you know, so we've missed all that time there. But you pick up with the character and you see where she was and you see where she is now. And there you can make inferences as to, okay, what's her life been like? You know?
Right.
What has she gone through? You can do that.
And
work.
the big scar, and yeah. I mean, there's,
and I think things like that lead the reader on to interpolate backwards. That I think is good world building, where you don't have to explain. It was those specific character beats and of like character recognition and like tying back to her family. Like, again, you mentioned Abby's father is apparently like the most important person in the universe, and he's not in the story at all. We don't know, everyone she meets apparently has a relationship with this guy. And
you're
we, the
constantly
reader,
learning different things about him.
Yeah.
He's part of this faction that she was briefly part of, but then,
So would it have been worth in the story to have some sort of flashback so he is an actual character? I don't know. Would that have bogged the book down a little bit? I don't know. But anytime he came up, I was like, yeah, it's her dad now. Oh, someone else knows him. How about that? Oh, wait, he like started this rebellion of saboteurs going, okay, great. We don't know who he is. So things like that, I think, is where, in my mind, the story is a bit of a miss. But I agree, seeing those vignettes, the way that when he does jump time, and the next time we see Abby and we understand what she's just gone through. And so when we jump ahead, you can then interpolate what those years have been like. And we get a sense, this is, and something I think I talked about in terms of this book being included in our lonely sci-fi theme, is that Abby is never technically alone. She's on this ship. She's a stowaway, but she's constantly surrounded by and working with other people, whether reluctantly or not. She's always with and around and interacting with other people, but she still has that sense of isolation and loneliness because her sole drive now is to get back home. She made a choice as a kid to send her friends back home and to leave she didn't choose to leave her mom behind, but she was at a point where that was the only choice. She made a choice to save them and people she was with, but her sole drive is to get back home. So no matter where she goes, no matter who she's with, she's not where she wants to be. She's not with who she wants to be with. So she still has that sense there. And every time she seems to connect with someone, every time she seems to have some sort of found family, whatever it is, I don't know, it gets taken away, So she's constantly in this lurch, this cycle of connecting and losing, all in an effort to get back to the thing she wants to get to. Because as long as she's not there, she's going to feel isolated. She's going to feel like she's on her own.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, you're focused on the where of the loneliness. Mm-hmm. I think the thing that hit me the most is the very interstellar Matthew McConaughey scene, loneliness of time dilation. When he gets trapped on the water planet and, he comes back up and he's just watching video messages of his children's entire lives and just bawling his eyes out, like, incredible acting performance there. Really makes you feel the weight of it. But, when she walks home at the end and her mom answers the door and she's like old and worn down and rugged, it's
potentially older than her mother at that point.
Oh yeah. I mean, it has to be, and I'm not, again, that's one of those where I'm like, it's interesting that he invoked time dilation through space travel, but if you go into stasis, you're not impacted by it, even though you're on the ship. I don't understand any of that science. It's one line. Because it doesn't matter. He's like,
exactly.
This is what it is. Mm-hmm. Don't worry about it. Yeah. And in a sense, if we keep his central metaphor intact, wealthy, affluent people essentially do have time dilation. They live longer, they age slower. They like that, but they like, it is that way. And you can meet, you can meet fashionable middle-class people now that are like 55 and you would have sworn they were 37. Mm-hmm. And you can also go somewhere where somebody's working, really hard labor, factory or something like that, and they look like they're about ready to collect Social Security, and they're like, I just turned 50, and that is the way privilege and power works.
You can go back not that far known history, and you see photos of people from the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and you're like, oh yeah, that guy's 45, and you're like, I'm sorry, what? And you're like, wait, how old am I? And why does that guy look like he's 82? You're right. It is a harder life. And there is that's a really great point. I really like that idea of isolation on the class strata there, using time dilation and extending that metaphor out. I hadn't thought about that. That's a great extra layer there. That's one of those things that, like, if that was planned, if that's part of the theme, that's awesome. If it's not, then it still works on that level too. I don't know how planned that is, but now that you're saying it, I'm thinking about it. It's great. It has to be. Well,
it has to be planned to some extent. It's not a throwaway line.
Well, it's definitely part of the idea of the class divide. There's no question about that. The idea that the fact that these people are on this luxury liner, and one of the options is to just go into stasis.
Right.
So they can, meaning that, like, the journey actually isn't important to them at all. It's like they get to say they went somewhere. Without
the cost of it.
It would be like getting to climb Everest, but just like waking up on the summit and be like, hey, cool, I'm here. And then you go back to sleep and you're back down, at base camp, Like, you didn't have to do any of the work. None of the journey is important. It just, you said you did it. So yeah, that's clearly a part of the metaphor of this class divide and what this world is that he's showing. But I like thinking about it through the idea of being isolated in time. And you're right, the fact that Abby, by being on this ship, the mere fact of her being on this ship, even if everything goes quote unquote right, and she is able to just get back home somehow, the amount of time it's going to take her to get the amount of time she's going to experience is going to be radically different from when she gets home, regardless of how we see her at the end, when obviously she's much older, she's battle scarred, she's beaten, she's been through all this stuff here. If she's just able to turn around some in those first 10 years or whatnot, not having to be part of this saboteur team and all that, she would still be isolated because she's separated in time from the place and the people she wants to be. There's nothing she can do about that. That's an inevitability for her. And I hadn't thought about that prior. That's cool.
Yeah, I mean, that was like the class thing seemed like it was really brought up in our face a lot, and it was unclear to me if she ever really knew her father, or if part of this quest is her learning who her father was, for better or worse.
I think that was the end result. That wasn't her intent. She had no idea. All she knew was that her dad worked on one of these ships.
Well, I guess, okay. But her dad showed her around the ship. That's how she knew all the little hidey holes and crawling. So clearly she knew her father on some level. Obviously, she did not know him like everybody else did.
That he started this entire rebellion, apparently. That he recruited every single person who works for this rebellion. All of the quote unquote blue collar workers, I guess, all the staff. They're all the ones.
Yeah, he's the original union mobster.
Exactly.
Right?
He's Sally Field holding up the sign union. But yeah, I mean that wasn't her intent, because she didn't know what she didn't know. Right. So she wasn't like, I got to find out about my dad by doing this. She was doing it as a means of survival.
Right. There was no mystery as far as she was concerned about her father.
Yeah. She was only there out of necessity of, we raid these ships. And there's even some line early on of like, yeah, we can take these supplies, we can take all this stuff, and they're never going to know, because it doesn't matter to them, because they don't need any of it. It's like they have so much, this stuff will feed us for years, and they're not going to know what's missing. And when they do, it's going to be like, all right, whatever, we got plenty. So that idea of that's her motivation. Her motivation is just trying to survive, just trying to do what she can. And it's obvious that this is something she's been doing for a while. It's something that happens often on this planet and probably other planets like hers.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, that's really my biggest beat from like the whole story. I will say, we spent so much time talking about his writing that we're neglecting the obvious draw of the book, which is the art.
It's fantastic.
I mentioned it before we started recording, but there are these like splash pages. Well, lots of splash pages, big ships and things like that. But the splash pages inside the ship where it's like the continuous scroll action of her kind of rolling and tumbling through, it's the hallways and pathways and conduits. It's just magic. I don't understand how every time she's hiding up an event and we're checking in with her, it happens to be her getting spotted. Like, these are we never really see her at rest. Like she's just always fleeing from something, squaring off against something, and then you fast forward to the next one.
Yeah, well, but we do see she has like a bed and she's surrounded by letters.
No, she's been there for a while. We just never get to see her with her thoughts.
She has time there. Yeah. But I agree. Those splash pages, anytime he does anything like that, it's like his version of the DeLuca effect, which is something we've talked about before. That idea of seeing a stationary image and your character moving through space multiple times on one image to invoke movement. The way he does that with like Abby moving through the vents and the pipes and all that, and then you see like intercuts of like random people just like sipping champagne or whatever, the passengers of the crew as she's in the inner bellies of the ship itself. Those scenes, those pages are incredible, and they look so good on the double splash, again with the larger format of the DSTLRY books, the magazine style. It looks so cool. And you're right, that is, I mean, for me, I think that's the biggest draw, because I'm such a huge fan of Jock. It is cool to see him draw something too that isn't specifically like horror bent. So much of what he does and the stuff he does specifically with Scott Snyder, even when they were working on Detective Comics, that detective run was real horror based. The Black Mirror and all that stuff. That stuff that Snyder did with Jock and Francisco Francavilla. There's a lot of horror stuff there. Not just horror for Batman, just like actual horror. So it was cool to see him draw like a sci-fi world, a dystopian sci-fi world, because so much of what I associate with Jock in terms of what I've read out of him, aside from like seeing him do a cover, the actual interior stuff that I've associated with him has a more horror bent. And I think the way he draws, his style, it has a bit of an edge to it. It reminds it feels like in a similar vein to Andrea Sorrentino.
Oh yeah.
A frequent collaborator of Jeff Lemire, also someone that does horror really, really well. There's just something about that style, the way he draws faces and characters. I think the way the lines work, there's something about it that just is kind of naturally fit to that. I think the colors reflect that too in a lot of those books. But again, to see him draw a sci-fi world, a space world, something that I have not seen him do as much of, but clearly something he's done before. I think, as we mentioned, the first stuff he did was for 2000 AD over in the UK, which is a sci-fi publishing. All those stuff is sci-fi. So it's not like he doesn't have that club in his bag, but in terms of the stuff that I've read from him here in the States, so much of it has been horror based and horror bent. So I'd like getting to see, for me, what was a different pitch from Jock, getting to see that style and his kind of story sensibility in a different kind of world.
Yeah, I have to say I would never question whether I should be looking at Jock's art or not, but I don't know if you happen to have ever seen the Cliff Chiang variant for #1.
For this?
Yeah, for this book.
Oh yeah.
Because when I saw that, part of me was thinking, oh, what if Cliff had drawn this book? Like interiors, almost a different book.
It's Totally different vibe. Totally different vibe.
But I'm here for it. Like it would have been a wild move for Jock to say, I'm coming on to your publishing house, and I know you brought me here because as an artist, but I'm here only as a writer. That would have been wild. And I'm not even saying I want that. I'm just like seeing Cliff draw these characters in this world, and the way way it's colored and everything was like, wow, like the whole mood of the story would feel different, even if every page and script was the same.
Mm-hmm. If you haven't seen that cover, that, you know, I think if you have, I think I'm pretty sure in all the distillery trades, in the back they have a cover gallery, because they did so many covers, because like every artist in their roster basically did a variant cover for everyone else's book, because why the hell not? You're all there at the company together, you're all there at the publishing house. But yeah, that Cliff Chiang one is so good. But you are right, it's a completely different feel. It's a book I would want to read. It wouldn't be this book though, you know, it would be totally different. You know, but you said it would be wild if Jock went and asked for that. Part of me thinks he might have been able to, because he is doing a book with Scott Snyder writing and him drawing. So he could have been like, hey, I'm doing this book with Scott. This is, you know, everybody knows us as a team. The book I want to do, I just want to write, and I want to work with an artist that I like. You know, if he had done that, I don't think Distiller is going to be like, nah, you know, because whoever Jock's going to want to work with is probably going to be someone great. Not saying it would or wouldn't be Cliff Chiang, but I'm with you that seeing his style for this book and thinking what that book would have been like, what that vibe would have been, it would have been different, but it would have been cool. And I obviously would have read it. It would have been awesome.
Yeah. Again, if Jock were to ever hear this, I would be horrified for him to think that I would want someone else to do his book. Yeah. I'm just saying, like, you just happen to pluck another person that I just adore, which is Cliff Chiang.
Well, yeah.
And bringing the kids on bikes attitude to this. It would have helped if there were a bigger or more consistent cast other than one character.
Yeah. Or if we stayed with Abby longer as a kid, you know, if the book were about her trying to navigate that time when she's truly alone, right? When she's on the ship, the other saboteurs are on the ship, but she's not aligned with them yet. You know, that happens at the end of the first issue. And then there's the jump cut to 10 years later when she's now working with them. If the book had been about her time alone on the ship, trying to navigate the crew, the passengers, and the saboteurs, so you got these three sides and her by herself. Again, completely different book. I would have also read that, even if Jock had been like, this is actually what the story's about. If what the story had been presented, I would have read that one too, because that one is also very interesting. And that one would have played a lot more probably into our theme, because she would have been truly isolated, you know? But I like the twist here of trying to follow this character who is alone, but is constantly finding herself in situations where she can't be or isn't, you know, and having to make do, you know? She is alone, but you know, she has the chef there, right? That's like the one person when she's a kid, those first couple of weeks,
right?
You know, and then he dies, and now all of a sudden she finds out that he's actually working with the saboteurs, and so that gives her a reason to kind of trust them, and so now she's aligned with them, but then finds out that the saboteurs have a completely different thing. You know, they're not trying to get home; she's just trying to get back, and so she's unaligned with them, and then she's briefly aligned with the captain, who plays some emotional angle that, because apparently he had a thing with her mom, and her mom is pregnant with his kid, but then it turns out that was all the ruse, because her dad, you know, it gets very complicated and gets really kind of weird and soupy there. But the idea that she keeps latching on to people because she's grasping for something, because she is all by herself, she has nothing else, so she's trying to find a tether, all in an effort to get back home. And then there's a little bit of a fearic aspect to it when she does get back home, right? As you said, she comes back as like a considerably older person who has lived an entire life. And she comes back and she finds out she has a kid brother, and her mother is effectively the same age, right? That kid is what, maybe 10 years old, 8 years old.
I'm really bad at kid ages.
I got no idea. It doesn't matter. She's aged almost, 18, 20 years. She's gone from 10 to 30 or whatever. And that. So yeah, the idea that even though she does get back, because they missed all this time there, that you think about how that plays for the character and kind of what that means for her and like what it cost just to get back, just to get the thing that she actually wanted, even though it could never be the thing. It could never be the way she would actually want it because of the way that the world works here, the way the science works in Jock's world.
Yeah. Any other like major beats that like caught your attention or nits to pick or like thoughts on loneliness that we haven't really touched on yet?
We covered the biggest nit, I think, story wise. I think the biggest strength, I think, is just the art. I think it looks gorgeous. Anytime he does a splash page, even if it's not like kind of the interior DeLuca effect. Yeah. Just anytime there's a big double page splash and you get a chance to really look at that, whether it's the ship or in space or anything like that, all that detail, all that stuff looks so good. And I love going back and taking a look at it. I do find it interesting in that so much of you talked about it being kind of episodic, right? That we keep jumping through time. And I kept thinking back to our discussion last week with Traveling to Mars and our character of Roy and how, the point of that book is almost kind of the mundanity of, we talked about in that book how there are all these moments where you think there's going to be the big action scene, the big confrontation scene, the big thing that happens, and it turns out to not happen. And Roy just kind of turns around and is like, well, all right, another day, Right. It's like, well, that happened. Back to sleep. Let me get some ice cream. Then I go to him. I'll watch this movie, the same movie I watched again, and I'll go back to sleep, and tomorrow's another day. There's a mundanity to it. And what we have here in Gone, Jock has just skipped all that. It's like, no, we're jumping on the action beats. When we drop in, this is when it's going down. And he's telling an action story here. But the way we understand the character, and I guess what we understand Abby's motivation from that idea that she is separated from the place she wants to go. And so we know her motivation, no matter what she's involved with, is just trying to survive long enough to get home. So she's never fully aligned with anybody because we know what her base motivation is. And so I think from that aspect, I think it is an interesting comparison of like, this is a different type of story, it's a different spin on that, on how you can show and kind of depict what happens to a person when they're alone, quote unquote, or at least by themselves, I guess. Maybe Abby is more in that case. She is by herself, but she is not alone, obviously.
Well, so the time dilation becomes huge for me here because what I take the meaning of the book to be is like, she keeps talking about different relationships, like such and such and such with my father, but now he's gone. And then, the chef guy, he's gone. Jay, gone.
The leader, he's gone.
Yeah. Like so and so gone, and her whole quest is to go back home. And she goes back home, and in a very real sense, her home is gone, even though everyone is still there and basically the same age and everything. Mm-hmm. But she's gone. Like her home is gone because she has outaged it and outlived it in a lot of ways. And I think there is like this, I don't want to like beat this horse too much in case I'm misreading the book. I would be surprised if I were, but I'm wondering if part of this book, because there is like this, someday we're going to hop on that thing. We're going to get out of here. We're going to like catch a ride to a better place, or it'll be better on the ship than it is down here, which arguably that would be true. Even living in the vents of that ship, I think, if you had your loved ones with you, could be a better existence than what they had on that planet. However, is the argument here, or is the book somehow suggesting that there's this, myth of upward mobility, is gone, arguing that like escape narratives are themselves a form of propaganda. Like the idea that you could get out, or the idea that there's even somewhere to go if you got out, is a form of propaganda that feeds false hope to people trapped in a bad system.
That's interesting. I think, and I like that. There's something to that. I think another way to look at it could be is it's not about the escaping and leaving. The commentary is that you can't go home again.
Right.
Is that the idea that
because whether home has changed or you have, you can't go back to what you had before.
Yeah.
You can't unsee the things you've seen.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think maybe that's what he's saying there. I do like that idea of as you were talking about that, I flashed back. It's not part of our Lonely in Space, although it would kind of fit. I flashed back to our discussion of Joyride.
That's what I was thinking about.
Colin Kelly, Jackson
I almost brought that up at the top, but I was like,
and Marcus Toe.
Enough callbacks.
Yeah. That idea of, because they're a little more intentionality with what they did versus Abby, but they jump on a ship and they go away, right? But they come back to fix their world. You know, Abby has not come back to fix the world. She's come back just to be part of it again, and probably finds like the next page after the end is probably a whole bunch of like, okay, you're my daughter, but like you're not anymore. You know? Right.
Yeah. You're older than me. You've seen more of the world and the galaxy than I have.
Yeah. Like I as a mother, I'm sure things like I have missed all this time, but then also it's like, but you have missed all this time as well with me, you know, by having left. So maybe it's a commentary on that. The idea of there's the cost to doing that, you know?
Yeah, which is always, I mean, that is
which is true, which is always true.
It's always true. But it is the dark, the underexplored dark underbelly of coming of age stories. Like,
yeah, true. Yeah.
Like, and that's what the Disney princesses very rarely have to reconcile with in their coming of age stories. That's true. Is like the consequences of like, there's so much privilege to a Disney princess, right? Like they can eschew, like
they're
they can run away from
princesses.
The palace. Right. They can run away from the palace. They can, go, gallivanting around the city with a thief who gets arrested and golden parachute, I'm not in trouble. Maybe I got grounded for a day or something like that, or maybe I'm Ariel and I make a deal with the devil, and through no effort of mine but only the animal friends around me do I woo this man, and then he gets tricked out of it. I just roll over and give up, but the animals break up the wedding. And, somehow the lesson was I was right to throw everything away, sign a deal with the devil, do this thing, because they are going from such a place of privilege that they have a safety net, and they're very rarely risking that safety net. I mean, like, they're Disney movies. So like, the stakes are just different than real life.
But that's all children's stories, though, in general, the idea of moralizing through that way.
But a lot of coming age stories are targeted at the coming of age audience.
Very, very true. Yeah. But like, I think
a more realistic one would be like the movie Lady Bird. If you ever saw that.
Sure. Yeah.
Greta Gerwig. That's probably my favorite coming of age story in the last 10, 15 years.
But that's also a movie that is based in using reality versus any sort of fantasy aspect to tell a morality tale. You talked about, you mentioned Cliff Chang, so obviously I'm thinking coming age stories. I'm thinking about Paper Girls, which is just one of the absolute best in my mind. That idea of these experiences can change you whether you realize them or not, and those characters go back. They are quote unquote reset, they're reset. They quote unquote forget everything they go through, but yet the bonds are strong enough that when they return back to their place of origin before all this starts, there's still some connection there. So there is a change there, and there's an idea that you can change, and those can ripple through back in time. But I think the idea of leaving, it's like, the idea that is the grass green on the other side. Well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But once you go and come back, it doesn't mean what you left is any better or worse. Doesn't
Right.
mean what you return to is the same, because it has changed and you have changed, and you have to reckon with that. And I like the idea of looking at the book in that way, that there's a nobility, or not nobility. There's something worthwhile about this kid turning into this young woman, turning into this adult, just trying to get home. There's something I left behind. I'm trying to get back to that, and I'm going to do everything I can to get back to that. That is something that is praiseworthy, but you have to have the understanding that when you get back, like, you're not the same. So what are you going back to? You're going back to an idea that just doesn't exist anymore.
Right. Well, now I'm drifting back into politics. You're talking about the idea of reverting to a thing that doesn't exist anymore.
Of course, yes.
Possibly never even existed.
Never existed at all. Yeah.
Right.
Well, but I think that is also very true, right? Because there are coming of age stories about that. The idea that I'm leaving this thing that I'm at for a thing that I think is better, but my idea of what I have and my idea of what I'm trying to get to are falsities, because I don't have the knowledge or the experience. The place I was never the place I actually thought it was, and the place I'm trying to think, the place I think I want to get to, is never the thing that I think it is. There are plenty of stories about that, of just not having the awareness of your situation, because I think that's a big part of coming of age stories. And so, yeah, and I think especially for this kind of tying it into the theme, this idea of lonely sci-fi, so much of that is trying to think back to what your life was like and what you're trying to get back to. And I think we've seen that weirdly in the books, in the two books, not weirdly, that's strange, in the two books we've talked about so far, right? In Sentient and in Traveling to Mars, you're looking back on a time, like in Sentient, those kids, that story is written from the perspective of one of the kids looking back on their life, right? Back on their time on the ship. And the way that they talk about Valerie as being their mother is not the way they experienced it as it was going on. It's only in hindsight. They can reflect back and be like, you know what? She was there. It was there taking care of us, yada, yada, yada. You have Roy on a ship all by himself looking back on his life on Earth. We're getting his memories, his thoughts. And what's being presented is very much like it seems like a real black and white, like we're getting warts and all of his life and his experience, and the choices he made, the mistakes he made, the experiences he had, but he's still looking back on it with some level of fondness, right? Was it actually that way? Or is the isolation of knowing it's gone, of knowing he's left it behind, forcing him to look back and be like, it wasn't that bad,
Yeah.
It is the situation of being trapped and lost out there, being like, it wasn't that bad. It wasn't that bad what I had. And I wonder if Abby has the same thing, because clearly Abby's life on that planet, not great,
Right. Yeah.
Everything we've seen, everything not that great. So she's trying to get back to that simply because her mother's back there. But is she thinking about, I got to get back to that life where we're risking our lives, hoping to steal some rations off of these cruise liner ships that come by every so often, but still that hardship is either being erased or colored over in her mind, because she's like, well, I got to get back home. I got to get back to my mom, And so because she's not there, she's looking back with these kind of, rose tinted glasses of like, I got to get back to that. That's what's important. That's where I need to be, versus the idea of, and maybe this is cold, but versus the idea of, this is where I am now. This is, she's not focused on what she is now and what potentially her situation could be going forward. She's not looking at reality. She's always looking backwards.
That yes. And I think, again, this gets to a little bit of a wild time dilation of, she spent her entire life wishing time away. She was just trying to
that's good.
Fast forward through this ship ride, because she didn't realize this ship ride is most of your life now. For better or worse, there's no getting off this ship. And if you did, there'd be certainly no getting back home. Your best chance of getting home is on this ship. Yeah. But this ship is not headed to your home anytime soon. She was just counting down the days. I don't really understand the mechanics of her sending letters to her mom to let her know that she was okay. Those letters probably haven't arrived yet.
Well, no. I think she was writing them almost like a journal, because I think we see in the room.
I see. Okay. I thought there was some crazy technology where she was sending them through a wormhole or something, and I was like, I just can't imagine. The priority mail upcharge for wormhole time dilated delivery.
2-day express priority. That's tough. But no, I think she was writing them as a way to stay connected. But yeah, they were. It effectively served as a journal or a diary, because they're not getting sent. She's writing them as like, am I ever going to give these to my mom? I don't know. But at that point, if you're able to give them to your mom, then you would be there as well. But yeah, there is, I just
although it would have been interesting if before the journey ended, she had gone back and read, like, again, if this was a regular format, a 12-issue series, it would be fascinating to see her read her own journal entries from all that time ago, because it would almost be like, if you've ever read something that you wrote 20 years ago, like a school paper or something, you just like,
who is this person? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I'm like, well, I won't speak on your behalf. When I read myself writing like grad school papers, which was only 10 years ago, 10, 15 years ago now, I'm like, who is this pretentious prick? Just like constantly flexing, book knowledge and vocabulary and long, complicated sentences. Because I'm like, I think I've grown up and matured past that. But anyway, it's just one of those like easy benchmarks where it would have been funny if she was writing them to her mom, ended up reading them herself, and got to see her own level of change just her internally, without having to show up at her mom's door and see her mom be young and realize like, oh God, like, it's all gone now.
It could have given her a different level of self-awareness. Not saying she's not self-aware at that point. I think it's hard not to be. But that would have been a more tangible thing to look at and hold on to than versus what she sees in a reflection. So.
But, for all of this, I like all of this stuff ideologically. Mm-hmm. But what I keep coming back to is I never cared whether she got home or not.
I agree. Yeah.
I never cared whether they successfully took over the control deck of the ship after 10 years of struggling.
Yep. I didn't care when the virus was released and
I did not care if the virus released.
Thing
other than it looked really pretty.
It looked really cool. Looked really cool. But I'm 100% in alignment on that. That all the stakes that were presented in the story, I did not connect with any of it. Yeah, they were just things that happened. Like, okay, here's the next thing that happened.
So it's one of those where perhaps a softer hand with those things would have been appreciated, since
could have been.
We didn't care about them anyway. Like, don't try to make it seem so momentous when you've given me no reason to care about it.
Yeah. Because
I think that's my main nitpick.
I would agree that the moments where it's very clear that this is meant to be a big aha moment. And when you're aware enough as a reader or an audience member to know, like, oh, this is supposed to be big, right?
Right.
Why am I not feeling it as being big? Like, that's not great. That's not ideal in terms of storytelling and story presentation.
Yeah. Apparently that was a big flaw of the Valerian movie a few years ago. I love the original Valerian in the City of a Thousand Planet comics, the French comics from the 70s.
Right.
Apparently just the worst movie adaptation possible. Probably 5 years ago now, but I just heard it covered on.
Oh, I think it's more than that.
How did this get made?
Like 10 years.
And Jason Mantzoukas was just saying, like, they spent 90 minutes of the movie expositing the stakes for you, and then do like one battle where they're like, you remember the stakes, right? Because we spent a lot of time explaining them.
A lot of capital in that.
Right. And he was like, in the first 15 minutes, the story they talk about is more interesting than the story I'm watching.
Yeah.
And
that's tough.
Why wouldn't you have made that story?
Yeah.
But that's an all too common, tragic flaw in movie making. And my suspicion is that in storytelling in general, my suspicion is, I think it's harder in movies than a lot of other things, because with comics, you're publishing incrementally. You can tactfully pull off a pivot midstream a lot easier than you can 3 months into a 4-month shoot. And then you're just like, I'm watching the dailies and it's awful. Yeah. We're at our budget. Yeah. I have to release something.
We got to find it in the edit room, right?
You got to try to find it in the edit room, do the best we can, but I have to release something. And like, I do find bad movies very fascinating on that level of like, just trying to figure out, like, clearly this is not what anyone wanted to have happen. Like, the directors are embarrassed. The people that are involved are embarrassed. It's not what anyone intended, but it's what we got. And the reasons for that are sometimes fascinating, because I also really enjoy when I see a bad movie and I think, oh, there was a lot of good ingredients in there. Oh, like, I think there was a good movie to be had in there. Yeah. That they either just didn't have the time or budget, to like pull off the final execution. Yeah. I think you're right, the one that a lot of people in the comic universe would point to would be like, basically any Zack Snyder movie. And those are the ones I don't feel that way about. I'm like, more time would not help those movies.
Well, I think Zack Snyder, I think you can get a better movie out of his stuff. I don't think you get a good movie, but you can definitely get a better movie out of his stuff. But I agree. I think with comics, it is tougher with a series like this where it's 3 issues, and a lot of it was probably, script wise, probably done not all at once, but pretty darn close to it. If you only have 3 issues, it's harder to pivot, but you're definitely right. If it's a longer 8, 12, the transition out of periodicals, making a pivot is a lot easier. Yeah, it is a lot easier in that sense. But again, the idea of trying to do that in a 3-issue series like this, again, not saying that this book needed a pivot.
No, I didn't mean to imply that, but you're right. Just saying,
if you have more room, if you have a little more space to breathe, you can make adjustments. But I think that goes back to the nitpick we talked about at the beginning of just like, the story's a little loose, like a little tighter, a little more focused, a little more, I don't want to say hand holding, but just a little more. It's rare when I want more explanation. I only feel that way when I'm reading a story and it's not one thing comes out of the blue, but multiple things come out of the blue. There are a number of character things that come out of the blue, like that fleet commander's relationship with Abby's mother, the fact that, Abby's dad was like the original saboteur, and every reveal felt like came out of the blue. Nothing was set up beforehand. And I'm guessing because nothing was set up beforehand, I think you mentioned before, that's probably all intentional. Because it would have been weird if some things were foreshadowed and then some things weren't. The fact that basically nothing was foreshadowed, I'm guessing that had to be the point. So that was what he was trying to go for. But something like that isn't my preferred ideal. So, but I don't think it detracts too much from the story, because there are larger things at play. And I think if you look at it from a more of a commentary angle, if you look at more of it thematically, if you really just focus on the art and what Jock does on the page, I think you're still going to get something very worthwhile, and you're going to get value out of this book. Again, it's just it's a different way to look at this kind of what does it mean to be alone in space? What does it mean to be alone and on your own, away from everything you know? How do you adapt? How do you react? All those sort of things. This is an interesting and a different take, and it's one we hadn't seen yet so far in our theme of comics this month.
Yeah, the interesting thing that's just now hitting me is I will reread this book without really reading. I think you can basically get the whole experience without the words, which makes me wonder, like,
you probably could.
Could this have been a book like Step by Bloody Step, where like it's honestly not that far off, like, because the words don't really help you that much.
You could do it with just reaction shots, action beats, things like that, explosions. There's a version of this. Yeah, you probably could have done it. And yeah, like if I go back and reread this or flip through it, I will just do just that. And again, that's not necessarily a commentary on the writing aspect of what Jock did here, but it's just that I think because he's more seasoned in that part of the storytelling aspect, that the visual part is so strong. Right. That's where his talent and experience lies. He hasn't written as much, hasn't been published as much in that sense. So, he's still very green in that way in terms of being published on a major, in a major fashion. But yeah, that's not meant to be a dig on it, that it's not it. It's bad or poorly done. It's just that I think the art is so much stronger, and that part of the storytelling is so much stronger, that I agree. It may help too that if you reread it, you already know what the story is. It would be
100%. I mean, that's true.
It would be interesting to go in blind and see if you could do it and get the story and get a sense of what's happening without it.
Because yes, I could go read like Tom King's Batman run basically without the words now, because I've read the whole thing at least twice. I'm pretty sure I've read the whole thing 3 times.
Yeah.
And it sounds silly because it's like 85 issues or something. Yeah. It doesn't get faster every time you read it. Yeah. Yeah, and for the most part, those were slightly shorter issues because they were like $2.99 at the beginning, and
they were being double shipping. Yeah. So.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, obviously the more you read the comic, the more you can rely on the pictures and, less on the text. Yeah. However, I would say almost the opposite about Traveling to Mars. Like,
I agree.
I love Robert Millie's art. However, if he published, like, if Mark Russell did a Kickstarter and was like, here's a bound edition of my script for Traveling to Mars, I would buy that and I would read that again and again, because there's so many quotes in there that I want to capture, and there's not a great way to capture them in a comic.
That book is heavily reliant on narration. There's plenty of narration in Gone. You're in Abby's head a lot. She's narrating the things she's thinking, but
she's no Roy in terms of intellect,
because she's narrating things that are happening in real time versus versus what you're getting in Roy. You're getting his thoughts as he's writing, thinking back. Yeah, so it's more introspective. The structure is just fundamentally different. Yeah,
but I was wondering, because even though we mostly hear her dialogue, the narration boxes are also her voice. Mm-hmm. I was at one point, there was one of them, or more than one of them, made me think, wait, are these narration boxes being told from the future, like a saga or so many other things, or are these real-time narration boxes? Mm-hmm. And I felt like there was maybe inconsistency there that threw me off the scent, or maybe I had just been misreading a couple boxes.
And there is that one moment when the fleet captain takes over narration. It's like one of the few times we leave Abby's pure point. Yeah, that was a strange choice there, because we hadn't done that. For the most part, everything we've seen has been through Abby's eyes, whether she's in the scene or she's viewing the scene. There have been very few moments, but in that third issue, when we start seeing things from another viewpoint, that change of perspective is a little jarring. that could be kind of a note there too, where if you make sure Abby is present in every scene, you know, and the idea that the only things you, the reader, are seeing are the things that she's seeing. The only things you're hearing and experiencing are the things that she's hearing and experiencing. That'd have been an interesting, slightly different take, because the book is like 75% that. You know, it's almost all of that.
Right.
So yeah, that was a little jarring towards the end, where you're like, wait, who's speaking, or sorry, who's thinking right now? Because there is a change, and there is a change in dialogue box. I think those boxes at the end, what World Design did when the fleet commander is thinking, I think those are a blacked in box with white text on them. So that they are meant to be.
I didn't log it, but I did clock it.
I think they are meant to be different, but it's the only time it happens. You know, there'd be a different thing if you saw that spread out, if you saw that convention spread out multiple times through the book, then you have a better understanding of it. But the fact that that's like the one time it happens, and it's like this big climactic moment, and I think it just happens on one page. It's real quick, and then the fleet commander dies, you know? So like it was a little jarring at the end to get that bit of a perspective shift.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on this book before we move to ApocalyptiGirl next week?
No, I think that's all I've got on this one here. You know, next week ApocalyptiGirl is again it's another kind of hard turn away from the style we've seen already, the play on the trope. So I'm interested and exciting to get into that book, because that is the one book I hadn't read prior to us thinking about this theme. So I've read it since there, but when I was thinking about the theme and looking at books and looking at different types of stories, this is one I found and recommended before I had ever really dove into it. So it was interesting to have that already in my mind, this idea of how this book might tie into our overall theme, to already have that in my mind before jumping into it. So I'm excited to talk about it next week.
Yeah, I have basically no idea what to expect other than like the front cover of that book, which I would say giving me Juniper vibes.
The current, which is the most recent color printing. Yeah, the most recent printing one. Yeah.
But you're clearly getting the sense of someone alone in the most recent printing. You're getting someone very tattered in a chaotic, presumably busy setting, completely alone.
Yep. Yep.
Other than, you know, a pet, which I assume the character talks to.
Yes. Well, I'll spoil this. I'll spoil it right now. There's a cat heavily featured, so you know.
You had me at cat heavily featured.
That should be enough for you to jump in.
It literally always is. Anyway, you can find us at StoredArcs.com, Blue Sky Storied Arcs, Instagram Storied Arcs, and find a copy of ApocalyptiGirl. I got it from Hoopla, and we'll probably be picking up a print edition at some point, which is still in print. You know, we're just talking about the new printing cover. And we will see you next week. Thanks for listening.
Peace.